All right, Devosai, good morning. Let's begin. So today's daf is Nun Beis. Nun Beis, we are picking up from Nun Aleph on Nun Beis. You have a little bit to catch up on Nun Aleph. Nun Aleph. We left off with Tan Rabbanon, which is 2, 4, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. Last word on the line, Tan Rabbanon. So Tan Rabbanon. Shavuye Malchus, Harehein Kishavuyin. So literally the Brisa says that Shavuye Malchus, Kishavuyin Ganuvi, those captured by the Malchus, those captured ultimately again by the monarchy, are like those taken captives by thieves. So the Gemara says, on the other hand, Hare Kishavuyin, Ganuve Listos, Eno Kishavuyin. On the other hand, those who are taken by listim, armed robbers, are not like shvuyin. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, Shavuyi malchus, noshim sheshava hamelech l'tashmish. These are women that were captured by the king, I guess for the sake of serving in his harem. Harihin kishvuyin. They are like regular captives. Umutar leba'aleyen. They are permitted to their husbands. On the other hand, that what he calls genuve listos, those who are stolen by robbers, ultimately are not like shavuyin, which means that I will say they would not be permitted to their husbands. So the Gemara says, "Aiva hatanya ipcha," but we learn just the opposite. To which the Gemara says, "Malchus lokasha." So the truth is, it's not a contradiction. Why? Haba malchus achashverosh, haba malchus ben netzer. So it's actually very interesting. So the Gemara says that it depends on the monarchy. In a malchus like Achashverosh, where a woman has virtually no hope of ever becoming queen, so we assume that she is violated against her will. But in a malchus like Ben Netzer, we'll talk about Ben Netzer. Ben Netzer was a robber who was exceptionally successful. Everybody has to be good at something. So he was exceptionally successful, and he ransacked like a whole bunch of cities, and he essentially created for himself like a little fiefdom. See, he was like a king. So in a king like Ben Netzer, a woman knows that it's possible that perhaps she would be taken by Ben Netzer as a wife, and therefore, again, Lamaisa, the concern is that she may go ahead and engage willingly in tashmish, in the act of relations with him. Of course, if she engages willingly, then Lamaisa, again, that prohibits her to her husband. So the Gemara says it depends on the malchus. So listus lokasha, habavenetzer habalistim da'ama. Similarly, again, the listus is also not a kasha because it depends on the listus. One is the listus like Ben Netzer. So a man like Ben Netzer, where again he was a man of incredible reputation, and although he was a criminal, he amassed for himself a fortune and a little bit of an empire. So a woman may be tempted to submit willingly to him, ultimately, again, in order to be his wife, in order to be taken from him as a wife. On the other hand, again, regular robbers, so no woman is going to want to be associated with that, and therefore, again, we assume that she was violated against her will. And I will say, obviously, this whole Gemara is not really lemaisa for us, because remember, the Gemara yesterday subscribed to the idea of kol shetchilasa ba'ones yisofa baratzon, that even if the beginning of the act, even if the beginning is ones, is against her, well, even if over time she submits willingly, lemais, again, we still look at the act as an act of ones. To take it a step further, what is also interesting over here is, in these cases, the concern is that perhaps she will submit willingly, almost out of a sense of yeush, that perhaps she's never going to be redeemed. If she's never going to be redeemed, then perhaps she just has to make the best of this particular life that she has in front of her. The Gemara goes on. The Gemara says, I don't understand with Ben Netzer. Here, one place they call him a melech, and one place they call him a listim. So which one is it? In Gabi Achashverosh, listim hava. God bless you. Gabi listim da amma melechu. So also, like most things, it depends on who he's compared to. So compared to a king like Achashverosh, he's just simply a robber. But compared ultimately to other listim, he's like a melech. Good. So remember, the Mishnah said that in the Kesuva of a Kohenes, a husband promises that if you are taken captive, I will redeem you and return you back to your city. Remember, again, the wife of a Kohen who is violated is prohibited to her husband. So as such, again, he says, I will redeem you and I'll return you back home. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, Amana the Kohen Gadol is an interesting case. Let's say a Kohen Gadol married an Amana. Obviously, in a legal marriage. What's the halacha? Now she's taken captive. So what's the halacha? Chayiv liftosa. Abai says you have to redeem her. Why? Shani koriba ubikohenes adrunach lemdinaseh. Abai says you could fulfill the Tanai in the Kesuva. The Tanai in the Kesuva was that if you are taken captive, I will redeem you to your city. So therefore, again, even though she cannot remain married to him, but what? He can absolutely return her back home. On the other hand, top of Nun Beis, Mamzeres unasina li Yisrael. On the other hand, when it comes to a mamzeres and a nesina, so also remember, in the case of mamzeres and nesina, this is a situation over here where another illegal marriage, eno chayav liftosa. In that case, again, the Yisrael husband is not obligated to go ahead and redeem her. Why? She'ein ani koriba v'os avinach li le'intu, because he cannot fulfill the phrase, and I will return you as my wife. So Abai says something very interesting. Abai says, essentially, when the Tanai and the Kesuva can be fulfilled, even if the marriage was illegal, he still has an obligation to redeem her. So, for example, in the case of a kohen who married an almana, illegal marriage, but remember, what's the clause in the Kesuva? If you are taken captive, I will redeem you and return you back to your family. So the truth is, can he fulfill that clause? Absolutely yes. On the other hand, if it's a Yisrael married to a mamzeres, that's an illegal marriage also. Remember, the clause in a Yisrael's ksuva is, I will redeem you and I will return you to my home, meaning you'll remain my wife. That, of course, is impossible in this case because it's a prohibited marriage. And therefore, Abayi suggests that he's not chayiv to go ahead and redeem her. Now, I want to point something out. Remember again, even in these cases when we say he's not obligated to redeem her, so there is still a mitzvah pidyon shvuyim, right? The mitzvah pidyon shvuyim applies to everyone. The difference in these cases is that when one's wife is taken captive, the sole responsibility for redemption devolves upon the husband. That's the chiluk over here. But obviously, we're saying like he doesn't have to redeem her. Okay, hatzlacha rabba, good luck with that. Then, of course, the obligation of pidyon shvuyim kicks in, and the husband also has an obligation of pidyon shvuyim. Perhaps just he wouldn't have the obligation to foot the entire bill for the pidyon shvuyim. So the Gemara goes right to Rava. Rava on the other hand says no. Kol she'isur shavuya garam la chayav liftosa. Rava says no. In the case of the Kohen, it is only when the fact that she was taken captive prohibits her to her husband that the Kohen husband is obligated to redeem her. However, davar acher gorim la. But if there is something else that causes the prohibition from the wife to the husband, eno chayav liftosa. Therefore, Rava says it's not the fact that she was taken captive that prohibits the almana to her Kohen husband, to her Kohen Gadol husband, but rather what is the fact that she's an almana that prohibits the almana to the Kohen Gadol husband. Therefore, Rava suggests that in that case he is not obligated to redeem her. So the Gemara says, "Lema to kitanai." So we'll say fundamental machlokes Abayi and Rava. Now, I want to be clear. They both agree in the case of the Yisrael to the mamzeres that you're not obligated, the husband is not obligated to redeem her. Their machlokes is in the case of the Kohen Gadol who marries the almana. Rava says, Abayi says you have to redeem her because you could fulfill the clause in the Kesuva of I will redeem you and return you back to your home. Whereas Rava says that you are not obligated to redeem her because, again, it's not the fact that she was taken captive that creates the prohibition, but rather it was a pre-existing condition. So says machlokes tanaim. Hamadris ishtov nishpis was another interesting case. Let's say a man makes a neder prohibiting his wife from getting any benefit from him. So we will see later on that if you make a neder like that, prohibiting your wife from getting any benefit from you, that is grounds for immediate divorce and payout the ksuva. Because we'll say if a man goes out and says that his wife can't get any benefit from him, there's really no more marriage. So let's say he went ahead and he made the neder, and then right after he made the neder, she was taken captive. Now the shaila is what? The shaila is he obligated to redeem her? Rabbi Eliezer Omer Po Devinosin Laksuvasa. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to redeem her and you give her a ksuva. Rabbi Yeshua Omer No Sin Laksuvasa Ve'ina Poder. Rabbi Yeshua says no, you give her a ksuva and you're not obligated to redeem her. Meaning, in other words, that essentially once you have gone ahead and made that neder, pretty much the marriage is over. And now when she's taken captive, you give her ksuva, give her her money, but the husband is not obligated. Rabbi Nassan said Sha'ati Sumchus. Kisham Rabbi Yeshua, no sin l'ksuvas v'eina podeh. So we'll say. So Rabbi Nassan said, I once asked Sumchus when Rabbi Yeshua said that the husband just gives her the ksuba and is not obligated to redeem her. What's the case? Is that case shehedira ulubasof nishpis? Is that a case of where he first made the neder and then she was taken captive? Oh, benishpis ulubasof hedira. Or is that true even in a case of where she was first taken captive and then he made the neder? Va'amar li lo shamati. And Sumcha said to me, the truth is, I don't know. I never heard anything about this. However, v'nirin dvarim she'edira ula basof nishbis. But Sumcha said intuitively, I would assume that Rabbi Yeshua's position that all you have to do is give the ksuva and walk away only applies in a case of where first there was the neder and then she was taken captive. Why? Di'i amrit nishbis ula basof edira. Because if you say that ultimately what? That she was taken captive first and then the neder was made, asila rume, because we'll say then you know what could happen. Every single husband who just does not really want to be involved in the pidyon shvuyim of his wife, which of course opens up a whole nother dynamic, right? If a husband doesn't want to be involved in this, but in any event, every single husband who doesn't want to be involved with the piyun shvuim of his wife could simply, once she's taken captive, just make a neder. Just make a neder, ultimately prohibiting any benefits from you, and therefore you don't have to redeem her. Therefore, Sumcha said, I never heard anything about this, but it would appear to me that Rabbi Yeshua's position, that you just have to give her ksuva, and you're not obligated for redemption, only applies in a case where the neder preceded her captivity. So the Gemara says, "My love, b'madir eishes kohen kamifligi." Are we not talking about a case of an eishes kohen, right? Where again the case of the almana married to the kohen gadol, and that's the case of where the kohen gadol made the neder prohibiting his wife ultimately to go ahead and get hana from him. Va'abayi da'amar Rabbi Eliezer. And Abayi, Rabbosai, holds, like Rabbi Eliezer. Remember, Rabbi Eliezer holds that even in the case of a neder, you're still obligated to go ahead and redeem her and pay the ksuva. So Abayi holds like Rabbi Eliezer. V'Rava da'amar Rabbi Yeshua. And Rava holds like Rabbi Yeshua. To which the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Hachamay askinan. Oh, this is interesting. What's the case? Kigon shenadra ihi v'kiyem lahu. I will say, what's the case here? The case is not where the husband made the neder, but rather what? It's where the wife made the neder. But also remember, we know that in order for a wife's neder to be upheld, what has to happen? The husband has to be mekayim it. He has to uphold it. He has to affirm it. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer Savar, who knows sin etzba bein shineha. So Rabbi Eliezer says like this: if a wife makes a neder not to get any benefit from her husband, then what? Then lemaisa again, and the husband has to confirm it. He does say that is confirmation. Who knows? He put his finger between her teeth. In other words, that he put his finger between, she sheep it down on his finger, but that's why, because he put his finger there. Or say that's another way of saying he caused this. He didn't have to affirm the neder. He could have negated this entire thing. He caused it. Now, because he caused it, therefore what? He is responsible. Because he's responsible, if she's taken captive, so he has to redeem her and also give for her ksuva. On the other hand, Rabbi Yeshua Savar, he nasna etzba bein shinah. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, look, she made the neder. Yes, it's true he confirmed it, but she is the one who made the neder. Therefore, again, she put her own finger in between her teeth. She is responsible. And therefore, Rabbi Yeshua says, all the husband has to do is what? Pay her ksuva, but he has no obligation to redeem her. So Gemara says, he nasna etzba bein shinah. Ihi nasna etzba bein shinah. Ksuva maya vidita. So I'll say, so first of all, Rabbi Yeshua, if you're right, that she put her finger between her teeth, then Lemaisa again, why is there a ksuva? Maybe there shouldn't even be a ksuva in that kind of case. V'su, furthermore, Rabbi Nasan, sha'alti es sumchus. And furthermore, remember, Rabbi Nasan said before, I asked sumchus, ki Hashem Rabbi Yeshua, no saying la ksuva, saveina poda, kishedir levasof nishbis, o kishnishbis levasof idia. Remember, Rabbi Nasan asked sumchus when Rabbi Yeshua said that Lemaisa, a husband is not obligated to redeem his wife. In the neder case, rather he's only obligated to give her ksuva. I asked Sumchus, what was the order of events? Was it that he first made the neder and there was the neder first, and then she was taken captive, or was captivity preceded the neder? Va'amar lo shamati, and Sumchus said, I don't know, I never heard this. Remember, this is just repeating what I said before. The Gemara says, V'id denadra ihi, and if you're talking about a case where it's not that he made the neder, but rather what? She made the neder. Mali hidira ulabasof nishbis. Mali nishbis ulabasof hidira. If it's her that made the neder, if it's the wife, who cares what the order is? What does it matter if captivity preceded the neder or the neder preceded the captivity? Rather, the Gemara says we have to kind of get rid of this idea. Ella liolam da'ajir. So we'll say we're back to where we started, which means what? No, it's not a case of where she made the neder. The case of we'll say is where he made the neder. So we'll say the shaila now we're back to is a case of where what? Where lemaisa, a husband made a neder prohibiting his wife from getting any benefit from him. Then she is taken captive. So the shaila is, what are his obligations vis-a-vis her? Knowing that when a husband makes a neder to go ahead for his wife not to get benefit from him, that's grounds for divorce. That pretty much is dissolution of the marriage right then and there. So the shaila, she's not taken captive. What are his obligations vis-a-vis her? So Rabbi Eliezer said, remember, he has to redeem her and give her a ksuva, which is another way of saying redeem her and divorce her. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, just give her a ksuva, divorce her, and she's on her own. You have no obligation to redeem her. To which the Gemara says, Abayi mitaris tamei, Rava mitaris tamei. So we'll say both Abayi and Rava will have their different versions. Abayi mitaris tamei. So Abayi will say like this: Amar lekohen gadol kuli amilo pligi dechayiv liftosa. But Abayi will say like this: if an almana is married to a kohen gadol, and then she's taken captive, everyone will agree that what? That he has to redeem her. Now remember, both of this is Shivas Abaye, because Abaye holds that since he could fulfill the clause in the Kesuva. Remember, what's the clause in the Kesuva in a Kohen's wife? What's the clause in the Kesuva? I will go ahead and I'll redeem you, and I'll return you to your city. He can do that. So because he could fulfill that clause, he's obligated to redeem her. That's number one. Number two, Mamzeres in Yisrael kuli amalo pligi de eno chayv liftosa. And if Yisrael is married to a Mamzeres, everyone agrees that what? He is not obligated to redeem her for the simple reason that he cannot fulfill the Tanai in the Kesuva that says that she will return her to him as his wife. Madir eshes koin nami kuli amalo pligi de chayv liftosa. Rabbi says similarly, if a husband makes a neder, and this is the Kohen Gadol case, Madir Eshes Kohen, so he makes a neder, ultimately again prohibiting her from getting any benefits from him, and then she's taken captive. Everyone also agrees that what? Techayiv lifdosa. Dahainu amar leKohen Gadol, and also in Abayi's version. So again, if a Kohen makes a neder, prohibiting his wife from getting any benefit from him, and then she's taken captive, he still has to redeem her. Why, Rabbosai? Because remember, in Abayi's model, a Kohen making a neder that his wife may not get any benefits from him is no different than what case? No different than the case of a Kohen Gadol married to an Almana. Both are situations of where the marriage has to be dissolved. But the same way that a Kohen Gadol has to redeem his Almana wife, so too again, even if the husband made dinner there, he still has to redeem his wife. So keep pligi. Where does the machlokes come up according to Abaye? B'madir Eishes Yisrael. Oh, the case over here is where a Yisrael made a neder, prohibiting his wife from getting any benefits from him, and then she is taken captive. Rabbi Eliezer Azil Basra Meikara. Listen to this. So Rabbi Eliezer goes Basra Meikara. Basra Meikara means what? Basra Meikara means we look at the moment they get married, and at the moment they get married, was he able to fulfill the clause that if you are redeemed, I will restore you as my wife? As long as at the beginning of that marriage that clause was, I guess we'll call it enforceable, then Lamaisi he is obligated to honor it, even if what? Even if what? Even if circumstances change over the course of the marriage that make the fulfillment of that clause impossible. For example, he takes a neder sometime over the course of marriage that she may not get any benefits from him. So obviously at that point in time, even after he redeems her, he cannot return her to him as his wife, because she's prohibited to him. But l'maisa, again, because at the beginning of the marriage the clause was enforceable, therefore that, essentially what Rabbi Elazar says, is his obligation to redeem her is determined at the first moment of their marriage. As long as it's enforceable then Lamaisa it's enforceable for the duration of the marriage, even if circumstances change. On the other hand, Rabbi Yeshua Azil Basar Basof. On the other hand, Rabbi Yeshua goes Basar Basof. Basar Basof means what? We look at right now. We determine the enforceability of the redemption clause by the circumstances present at the time when redemption becomes necessary. So since, again, at the time when redemption becomes necessary, which is now, she's taken captive, she is prohibited to him because of the neder. Therefore, what? He's not obligated to redeem her. He gives her ksuva, and ultimately, again, he is free from this. So I will say that is Abayi's version. Rava mitaris atame. Rava goes according to his reasoning. He says, "Amar the Kohen Gadol, mamzer sesili yisrokli amlo plegi din chay liftosa." So I'll say Rava says no. Remember, this is Rava disagreeing with Abai from the beginning of the sugya. So he says, and whether it's an almana to a Kohen Gadol or a Yisrael marrying a mamzer, so I'll say any case of an illegal marriage, there is no obligation of redemption. Any case of illegal marriage, no obligation of redemption. Ki pligi. When is there a machlokes? Bemadir. In the case of the neder, husband makes a neder. Bein eshes kohen, bein eshes Yisrael. I will say, so now the fundamental machlokes case is in a situation where a husband makes a neder, prohibiting his wife from getting any benefits from him. And this is the fundamental machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer Azul Basra Meikara. Rabbi Eliezer says we look at the enforceability of the redemption clause by the circumstances of the marriage at its inception. So since again at the beginning of the marriage the clause was enforceable, therefore even if circumstances change, the clause is still enforceable. Rabbi Yeshua Azul Basra Basof, and Rabbi Yeshua at the end of the day looks at present circumstances now to see whether or not ultimately redemption would be obligatory. Okay, I will say. So therefore, the Gemara ends off over here with the machlokes between Abaye and Rava. So also you should just know that it seems to be that we paskin at the end of the day like Rava, and therefore again in the case of an almana to a Kohen Gadol, or in the case of a mamzeres to Yisrael, there would not be an obligation of redemption. So in any case where the marriage itself was illegal, there is no chiyuv for pidyon. All right, so the Gemara goes weiter. Nishpis chayav liftosa. Tan Rabbanan. Well, so this is actually very interesting as well. Nishpis b'chaye baila. Let's say a woman was taken captive during her husband's lifetime. The achakach meis baila, and then her husband died. So hikir ba baila yoshin chayav liftosa. As long as the husband was aware that his wife was taken captive during his lifetime, so meaning, in other words, his awareness, the Gemara is suggesting over here, triggers an obligation for redemption. Once the obligation for redemption was triggered during the lifetime of the husband, that trickles down to the inheritors of the estate. They too have an obligation to go ahead and redeem this woman. Abosai, remember, that's true even if this woman is not their mother. Right? It was just their father's wife. Essentially, because what the Gemara is saying over here is that the idea to redeem a wife is a financial obligation. Once that financial obligation has been triggered during the lifetime of the husband, after his death, that financial obligation trickles down to the estate, and therefore the inheritors must redeem her. On the other hand, hikir babayla yoshin chayav mitoso. Lo hikir babayla in yoshin chayav mitoso. On the other hand, if the husband was not aware that his wife was taken captive, I don't know, whatever the situation is there, right? He thought she was just out, whatever, right, for a week. Right? So he did not know that she was taken captive. Well, so no, again, all kidding aside, we were just talking about late Sonos beforehand. All kidding aside, the idea here is, let's say, Mom, he's on his deathbed, and she's taken captive while he's on his deathbed. So he never knew about this. Then what? Ein yarshin chayav liftosa. Then in that case again, the inheritors are not obligated to redeem her. So we'll say Levi savar leme aved of the kiyamas nisa. So Levi wanted to act in accordance with this particular brisa. Amarle Rav. Hachi Amar Chabibi. So Rav said, my uncle said the following: Les hilchasaki hamas nisa. The halacha does not follow the ruling that we just stated. Ella kiha. Rather, the halacha follows the following brisa. This sanya nishpes la'achar misas baila. Remember, I will say the first brisa makes the obligation for redemption by the estate, by the inheritors, a function of, we'll call it spousal recognition. That as long as the husband knew that his wife was taken captive during his lifetime, then at the end of the day, the obligation trickles down to the Yarshim. If the husband never knew about it, then the inheritors have no obligation. So Rava comes along and says, that's not the halacha. That's not the halacha. Rather, what is the halacha? The halacha is the following. If a wife is taken captive after the death of her husband, the orphans, the inheritors, have no obligation to go ahead and redeem her. Not only that, furthermore, not only that, but even if the husband was alive and while she was taken captive, once he dies, the obligation to redeem her goes with him to the grave. In other words, Rabbi say that the obligation to redeem a wife is upon who? Is upon the husband himself. So, because remember, Rabbi said this is a tonight. It's a clause in the Kesuva, and the Kesuva says that Lamaisa, again, I will redeem you and return you to as my wife, which means that the moment that I can't return you to as my wife, then Lamaisa again, I'm not obligated to redeem her. Which Rabbi said fits in perfectly with what we said earlier, that if he can't return you to as my wife, then at the end, like we said before, by the Amana Kohen Gadol, Mamzer Sidi Yisrael, if we can't resume a marital life, then Lamaisa has no obligation of redemption. So the Gemara says, so therefore, Lamaisa, I'm sorry?
What about the Yisrael of Kohen? Return to the city. Return back to her father's house.
Oh, so remember again, that goes back to Rava. Rava was the one who said that it could only be the Isser Shvuya. If the Isser Shvuya creates the inability for the Kohen to continue in his marriage. But if the Isser was there prior to becoming a Shvuya, there's an obligation for redemption.
Is the obligation talking about the monetary obligation?
Monetary, correct.
Okay. And for the ones who hold that it is a chiyuv, are they just saying the money comes from the estate, not
This is all about the money.
and the money from the estate?
Correct. Who's obligated to pay? Meaning the money from the estate. Correct. Husband has to take it out of his pocket to pay for redemption. The Yisomim, if you say the Yisomim have to, then it comes out of their estate. Correct.
Comes their own money.
No. It's all estate money. Yisomim would never be obligated to redeem their father's wife from their own money. Thank you. Let me clarify this point. But so whenever we say about orphans having to go ahead and redeem someone, let's say their father's wife, it's always estate money. Because the assumption is that since there was a financial obligation on the father, therefore the Havamina was that even if the father's dead, that obligation still remains on his money. But obviously, if there's no estate money, let's say the father died penniless, then there's no conversation. Then everyone would agree that the Yisomim have no personal obligation. Let me be clear. They have an obligation, just like every Jew has an obligation to redeem captives that they know about, but they have no specific obligation to totally bear the financial burden for this particular redemption. So therefore, Rava comes along and says that the halacha is like this last brisa, which says that the obligation to redeem the spouse is only when the husband himself is alive. But if he's not alive, whether he recognized it or didn't recognize it is irrelevant. If he's not alive, that obligation never devolves upon the Yisomim. Tan Rabbanon. So what's another interesting case? Let's say a woman was taken captive and her captors were requesting 10 times her value. 10 times her value. So what's the halacha? Pam rishona poda. The first time you redeem her. Mikan ve'elech ratza poda, ratza ina poda. It's interesting. Right? After the first time, if you want to redeem her, you can. If you don't want to redeem her, you don't have to. I was about to say that the idea over here is, it's not a good show of brachas v'arts. But you understand, the idea over here is that we're talking about an exorbitant amount of money. Rashi says, what does it mean, ratza ina poda? Delotakinur ba rabban elachat pidyon. In other words, the enactment, or the rabbinic enactment, the takana, that a husband has to redeem his wife, that there is one redemption per customer, right? One redemption per marriage. If she keeps getting taken captive, the husband is not obligated to keep on redeeming her. The Gemara goes weiter. Mikan ve'elach ratzvah, I find. Rav Shimon Gamliel says no. What says is Amud Beis, very important halacha. Ein podines hashvuyin yoser al kedei demehen. Rav Shimon Gamliel say famous shita. Well, that's actually this sug is really in Gittin. We'll talk about it extensively in Gittin. You do not redeem captives for more than they're worth. Mipnei tikkun ha'olam, for the benefit of society. What does that mean, mipnei tikkun ha'olam? So Rashi says over here, shelo yargilu laha'alos al demehen. In order that, remember we'll say, the problem is that if you go ahead and you start redeeming people for much more than they're worth, then at the end of the day, Lamaisi, you create a market for captives. Create a market. I should have extra Gemara. We create a market for captives. So if you create a market for captives, you're going to incentivize hostage taking. Rabosa, I will tell you, you should know, lest you think that this is not contemporarily relevant. When the opportunity to redeem Gilad Shalit came along, there was a major dispute among rabbinic authorities in Eretz Yisrael as to whether or not the swap should take place. And many felt that, as difficult as it was to say this, that the prisoner exchange should not take place because it was a situation of podin shvuyin yoser mikadei demehen. And if terrorists know that for capturing a soldier they can get a ridiculous amount in return, it's going to incentivize future kidnappings. Of course, this is the great tension within Klal Yisrael, because what are we known for? We are Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim. We are compassionate people, the sons of compassionate people. So the notion that we could go ahead and bring home a son of Israel, there's a part of us that says it doesn't matter what the cost is, we're going to go ahead and do it. On the other hand, from a practical perspective, Shimon Gamliel says you can't redeem captives for more than their value because you run the risk of then incentivizing the kidnapping market. He goes on, but again, what do you see from here? That if the captors are asking a legitimate price, however you define a legitimate price, you see that you redeem her, even though, let's say, the amount that they're asking for is more than the value of her ksuva. In general, the assumption is that a husband's financial liability towards his wife is there's a ceiling. That ceiling amount is the ksuva. So I would have thought that if a wife is taken captive, the most you have to go ahead and pay for her is the amount of her ksuva. Mr. Brown, I know this probably sounds strange coming in the middle. You should always redeem your wife. It's not, taking this out of context here. The idea over here is I would have thought that the ceiling on this is the ksuva amount. However, you see from here that no, you redeem her for whatever her value is, or a mini. So the Gemara is a kasha. Nishpis v'hayu mevakshim imenu ada sara b'ksuvasa. So we'll say again, the Gemara raises a kasha that if a wife was taken captive and her captives were asking 10 times ada sara b'ksuvasa, 10 times the value value for ksuva. Now, both say, now that is a lot of money. So 10 times the value for ksuva, pam rishona poda. The first time you could redeem her. Mikan ve'ilech ratza poda, ratza ina poda. After the first time, if you want to redeem her, you can. If you don't want to redeem her, you don't have to. In other words, say, so what that's saying is the obligation to redeem her is only one time. On the other hand, Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, im haya pirkuna kineged ksuvasa poda, ve'im lav ina poda. Reb Shimon Gamliel says that if her redemption amount is equal to her ksuva, then you could redeem her. But if it's not, meaning if it's more, then you're not obligated to redeem her. To which the Gemara says, Reb Shimon Gamliel trei kuli istu. Reb Shimon Gamliel has two kulas. He ultimately has two leniencies. What are his two leniencies? Number one, that you're not obligated to redeem her for more than her value. And number two, you're not obligated to redeem her for more than the value of her ksuva. So those are the two leniencies that he has. Fine. I'm sorry, kulas for the husband. They're financial kulas for the husband because it sets a ceiling on how much you're obligated to pay for her redemption.
That you'll have to do it the second time, though.
Correct. There'll be how much you have to do it the second time, but the kula is that there is a financial ceiling on the amount you have to pay. That is correct. So laksa chayv l'raposa. So also listen to this. Next thing in the Mishnah was if she becomes ill, you're obligated to pay for her doctor bills. Now, and this is very interesting. Tan Rabbanan, almana nizonas minichse yisomim. A widow is supported from the estate of the orphans. Now remember again, so let me clarify this point that Ben Sion made before. Estate of the orphans mean what? Remember, when we speak about orphans, orphans are not necessarily the children of the widow. It could very well be that the children are someone totally different. Someone totally different, meaning children you have from another marriage. The idea over here is that an almana is supported from the property of the property of her deceased husband. I want to be clear. Nichse Yisomim doesn't mean the orphan's own personal property, but rather it means what? The estate property. So the widow is supported from the estate property. So the Gemara says, Utsricha refuah harihi kemizonos. So we'll say, let's say now she needs some type of medical intervention. Let's say she needs medical intervention. So what's the halacha? Where does that? That's like mizonos. That's like food. So the same way that her food is given to her from the estate, support is given to her from the estate, so medical needs are also given to her from the estate. Rabbi Shimon says, no, listen to this. This is actually very interesting. Refuah sheyesh la kitzva, nisrapas miksuvasa, she'ein la kitzva, harihi kimizonos. So we'll say now the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon suggests that it depends what type of refuah she needs. If she needs a specific course of treatment that is defined, so it's a defined treatment, which for our purposes also means that it has a defined price tag, so then that comes from the ksuva. Any set amounts of things that she needs comes from the ksuva. But anything that, let's say she needs ongoing care, so we'll say ongoing care has the status of mezonos. The status of why? Because it will say mizonos represents any uncapped amount of expenses. So any uncapped amount of expenses ultimately are like mizonos, and therefore would just simply come from the estates. This is very interesting. So if she has a chronic condition for which she's going to require constant care, that's like mizonos. It comes from the estate. If she has a one-time condition, so then that's going to come from her ksuva. As I will say again, just to understand the logic behind it, just like the ksuva is a set amount, so any of her needs that are set amounts come from ksuva. Mizonos is an open-ended amount. That's her support. So any open-ended items also come from the estate like mizonos. Rabbi Yonasan, Asu akazas tam beretz Yisrael kirafua she'im la kitzva. So listen to this. So Rabbi Yochanan said that they made bloodletting. So once you understand, bloodletting was a very popular. Bloodletting was often the answer to everything. Right? You have a problem, just do bloodletting. So in Eretz Yisrael, bloodletting was like a refuah she'im la kitzva. Was like treatment, like medical treatment without not undefined. Without limit, right? Medical treatment without limit, and therefore now uncapped medical treatment, and therefore again lemais ongoing medical treatment, and therefore lemais again that would come from the zonos. That would be like sustenance. That would come from the estate, not her ksuva. But listen to this story. Krevid Rabbi Yochanan, Havale Isas Abba. So also listen to this. Rabbi Yochanan's relatives. Now Rabbi Yochanan is a great sage. So his relatives come to him, and what's the problem? These relatives, these children, these inheritors, their father died, and the father left behind a widow, not their mother. So they came to Rabbi Yochanan because they had a problem that she needed refuah kol yoma. Now, we'll say, here's the issue. The issue is she needed ongoing medical treatment, and what was going to happen? The children were a little bit concerned because they felt that the assets of the estate were going to be totally consumed by paying for her medical treatment. So what did Rabbi Yochanan say? He said, "Asu l'kamid Rabbi Yochanan, amar lehu, Ezel kotzula midi l'rofe. I have a very good idea. Go to the doctor and work out a deal with the doctor. And essentially say to the doctor like this, okay, this woman, this widow has this condition. She's going to require treatment for the next 20 years. How much money? Give me a price for the entirety of that service. I don't want to pay you daily, and maybe I'll even pay you a little bit of a premium if you go ahead and you give me a defined price for all of those services. Now I will say, now what does that do? That makes it into a fixed amount. If suddenly medical services become a fixed amount, sounds like an insurance company, right? If medical could become a fixed amount, then what, Rabbi? Say then what? Then suddenly it comes from her ksuva as opposed to coming from the estate. So it's a great chap. Rabbi, so listen to how this story ends. Afterwards, Rabbi Yochanan was very upset. He says, "Asinu atzmenu ke'archei hadayanin." I feel so low. I feel like I've sold him. You know what I feel like? I feel like a lawyer, right? Mamish, like I feel like I've hit. I'm sorry, right? I feel like now. I will say now. Understand what the Gemara means over here. When the Gemara is not a disparaging of lawyers. Archei Hadayana, what the Gemara is saying over here is that I feel like what I've done is I've manipulated the system. And Rabbi Yochanan says, I'm supposed to be better than that. My job is not to manipulate the system. Because what he did is, he really did. I mean, again, I will say, is it legal? Is it legal? Of course it's legal. Is it what the spirit of halacha intended? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So he says, I feel like I've made myself like a lawyer and I've manipulated the system. He says, the Gemara says, my savar. So what was Rabbi Yochanan thinking in the beginning when he gave this advice, and why did he ultimately feel guilty about it? To which the Gemara says, savar. In the beginning he felt, look, this is my family. There's an obligation to help out family. And therefore what? And therefore I wanted to help them out. They came to it, I wanted to help them out. Ulubasof savar adam chashav shiny. And at the end, he realized that, you know what? I will say an adam chashav, a Talmud Chacham has to rise above certain things. Sometimes, I will say a Talmud Chacham, it's not about helping out his family. Sometimes Talmud Chacham has to make the very difficult decision about this might be good for my family, but at the end of the day, it's not the right precedent to set. So in the beginning, he was trying to help out his family, doing a good thing. In the end, he regretted it because he felt that as a person of stature, he perhaps, again, should not have manipulated the system. Says the Mishnah, Lo kasav laben dichern dihavalech minai inon yarsun kesef ksuvasech yes achol kein the im achon chayev shutnai beis. I remember again, we've spoken about this extensively. This is what's called ksuvas ben dichron. So ksuvas ben dichron means literally the ksuva of male sons, which means that a woman would have a clause written in her ksuva that her sons that she would have in the marriage with this particular man whom she's married to now, they would inherit her ksuva. Now, what does that do? What that does is it says that even if he has children from another marriage, those children will inherit in the estate, but will not inherit in my ksuva. She wants her ksuva, dafka, to go to her children. So literally, even if he didn't write for her, but in dichrin the male sons that you will have with me, inun yarsuv kesek ksuvasech, they will inherit the money or the value of your ksuva. Yeser alful kein dimachon, more than the other portions that they inherit with their brothers. Even if a husband didn't write this in the ksuva, chayiv, it's still as if it's present in the ksuva. Why? Shud tonight bezin. Because Rabbi, I remember we've seen this concept that there are certain things that are considered to be just simple enactments of bezdin, and because they're enactments of bezdin, even if you don't write it into the document, they are still considered to be legally binding. Similarly, Yahavan liasvin bevesi misnazim minechschase aditilakun leguvrin. Similar, say if normally you're supposed to write in the ksuba that any daughters we have together will be supported by my estate until they get married. Even if you did not write that statement within your ksuba, that obligation still stands. Chayiv, why? Shutnai bezin, because ultimately, again, this is a condition of bezdin. The Gemara says, "Ateheyasvi bevesi umisina minachasi kol yomi mega amalosayich bevesi." If he did not write in the ksuba that if you are widowed, if I die, you will be supported from my estate all the days that you remain a widow, meaning until you get remarried. Chayiv, that clause is still binding. Shutnai bezin. So we'll say, what do you see from here? You see all of these clauses, either ksuvas ben dichrin, the male sons, giving the male sons the ksuva, or supporting the girls until they get married, or that you, widow, will be supported from my estate until you get remarried. Even if these things are not explicitly written into the ksuva, they are still considered to be halachically binding. It's a tenai bezdin. This is the type of ksuva they used to write in Jerusalem. And the people of the Galil, the north, would write their ksuvas like the men of Yerushalayim. And Yehuda hayukosvin ad sheyirtzu hayarshin litin lech ksuvaseich. Lefichach in Ratzu yarshin nosten lech ksuvasa upochnosa. So this is very interesting. In Yehuda, they had a very different approach. In Yehuda, what would they write? That the almana is supported. Let's say in the ksuva they would write that if a husband dies, the widow is supported from the estate as long as what? As long as the orphans want to support her from the estate. But the orphans have an interesting ability. What's their ability? They could buy her out. Now, I will say, buyout is very simple. Buyout means they pay her out her ksuva. So they have the ability at will to say, here is the lump sum of your ksuva, leave us on the Rabosai. Now remember, it is not in a woman's financial best interest to get her ksuva. Why? Because when she gets her ksuva, what does she lose? She loses mazonos. So if a woman is widowed and has no immediate intentions of getting remarried, financially the best thing for her is to keep getting supported from the estate. And then at some point in time when she does get remarried, she'll get the lump sum payout of the ksuva. So under normal circumstances, let's say in Yerushalayim and in Galil, the right to determine whether there's mazonos or ksuva is in the hands of the woman. In Galil, they left that right with the inheritors. So should the inheritors decide we no longer want to give you mazonos, we want to pay you out your ksuva, they have the ability to exercise that option and totally pay it out. So let's just do one line, then we'll have to stop. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Mipnei Ma Heskinu Ksuvas Ben Dichrin. Rabbi says it's actually very interesting. Why is it that they instituted a Ksuvas Ben Dichrin? Why did they institute this clause that the male children of the wife should inherit her ksuva? Because the boss said there was always a concern like this. A man is marrying off a woman, his daughter. Man is marrying off a daughter. Now, what do we want him to give her a dowry? We wanted to give her a dowry. What's the concern of every father when he gives his daughter a dowry? What's the concern? Right? That guy, right? That guy. Now that guy refers to my son-in-law, right? That guy is going to inherit all the property. That chas v'shalom, should the daughter predecease her husband, he's that guy. He's going to get all the property that I worked a lifetime to go ahead and amass. Oh, and what's going to happen? Therefore, a father is going to give less dowry. So how do we make the father feel more comfortable? That's what? Even if the father doesn't like that guy, who does he like? He likes his grandsons. So at least the knowledge, that's what? That the property that he gives to his daughter is going to go to his grandsons and is not going to be retained by that guy, allows him to go ahead and give a proper dowry. So we have to stop here for today. I think tomorrow...
5:45.
I know we could do it. We're going to start regular time. Mesilas Yesharim at 5:45. The daf will start at 6, and we'll do it. Tamir Tzashem. Shkoyach.